we begin Holy Week today. Holy Week is this weird thing, and you've probably sensed it already liturgically. We try to mimic the tension of Holy Week. You have moments of celebration, then you have somber moments like our text today. Then you have these amazing choir anthems that let us celebrate again. And we sit in the midst of the beginning of Holy Week, watching to follow Jesus where he goes. And we ask ourselves, like, is this a week of celebration? Is this a week to be sad? And the answer is yes. It's both. But isn't that all of life? In any given week, we don't know if this is going to be a week of celebration or a week of sadness, do we? And sometimes it's a little of both. There's a tension that comes as we begin Holy Week. A tension that says we bring all of who we are to God. Now, if we're going to bring all of who we are to God, it probably does good for us to ask, like that age-old question that, philosophers and theologians and, people at bars after 2 a.m. ask. Who is God? Who is God? There's a lot of images of God that we could turn to say, like, to conceptualize it. I love having a 6-year-old child. My son asks these questions, like when we drive and the sky is especially clear. He told me the other day, I can see heaven. God is up there. That's interesting. That means he actually listens in Sunday school too, which I'm grateful. We have other images of God. Maybe you've traveled to see the Sistine Chapel and that iconic image of God reaching out to touch the finger of Adam. God, this big, mighty force with the flowing white hair. We kind of have these images. Or maybe your God is a little more easier to conceptualize as a more modern-day pop culture version of God. I mean, who can forget my favorite, at least, image of God from Bruce Almighty, Morgan Freeman? I mean, no one else can play God as good as Morgan Freeman. The voice alone. We imagine the voice of God. God is this presence, this force. We've been looking at the 12 steps throughout the season of Lent. We're coming to the end. We look at steps 10 and 11 today. Next week on Easter, we'll do step 12. And we talk about a power that's greater than ourselves is the only thing that can restore us to sanity. Or in step 3, that we give our life and our will over to the care of God as we understand God. One of the fundamental aspects of 12-step recovery is that we understand this, if nothing else. God is God, and we are not. God is this force that is greater than us, that comes to us. But it's hard to conceptualize, especially when life is especially difficult, right? We've had just this week terrible things in the news. Mass shootings at schools. God, how heartbreaking at schools. And we always imagine that surely that's the last one, and yet then we're terribly disturbed when another one happens. And we listen to all the banter and the this and the that and the back and the forth and all these solutions. And the reason that we offer all these solutions is because the fundamental thing is things like school shootings scare us to death. And as human beings, when we are frightened to death, we grasp for anything that could give us certainty because it is really uncomfortable to sit with things we just simply cannot explain. Like, how do we protect children when we feel powerless? We've had storms go through areas of our country this week, destroying towns. And in the wake of natural disaster, we ask ourselves, how, God, do we live with this? And we want solutions, we want answers, we want something, anything that will give us a sense of peace to know that God is there. And sometimes God seems so distant. Our life of faith is one where we continue to follow in the ways of Jesus as we continue to seek God And in the midst of our daily lives, our ebbs and flows, our joys and our sorrows, we proclaim at least that God is there. We look at step 10. Step 10, if you followed along with us, is sort of the ongoing effects of step 4, which is that pesky little moral inventory. All the ways in which, we can be jerks in life, that we can be full of resentment and judgmental. You can be judgmental of everybody, and all these ways in which we can be angry. And step 10 says that we continue to be mindful of these defects. And when we find them, we confess them. Because we learn in step 4, part of the reason that we become with such gunk in our soul is that we let these instances of these defects take root, and we never do anything about them, and then it just kind of clogs up. So the only way we can keep them from continuing to clog is to say, hey, look, if I'm being resentful again, let me find it, name it, and try to move past it. When I'm angry, let me name it, say sorry if I need to say sorry, and ask for God's help to do better and be better. In other words, step 10 is this reminder that step 3 is real. That we don't just give our life our life and will to the care of God once, we do it every single day. We ask for God's help every single day. And at the end of the day, we say, God, where did I fall short? We try to find throughout our day ways in which we fall short. And we name them even when they're hard. And we say, if there's a conflict, if there's something going on here, it may not be our fault at all, but at least we can say, let me start with, could this be my fault? Could I have a role in this to at least make it better on my end? That's what step 10 is about. In other words, step 10 reminds us that we have an utter dependence upon God every day. Every day. I was talking with my son this morning. He's an early bird like me. He loves to get up early. That's not always a popular thing in my house for him, but he does. And he got up about 5:15, and it's still dark outside. And I said, do you like to be an early bird? And he said, yeah. And he said, why is it so fun to get up early? And something hit me. One of the reasons it's fun to get up early is I said, you know how when you're getting ready to go to bed at night, everything's getting darker? He said, yeah. So when you get up this early in the morning, even when it's dark outside, everything's getting lighter. And that's kind of like a miracle. We wake up every day to a miracle. That God is present with us. In spite of us sometimes, and in the midst of it all. And we say thank you. And we try to live into the way that miracle can flesh itself out in our daily lives. And then we move to step 11, which in recovery circles and 12-step circles is where we talk about conscious contact with God. Conscious contact with God. That we have conscious contact. It's recommended that we pray in the morning and in the evening. I think that's a good thing. It's a way to bookend your day. Could you start every day with a prayer to God, asking for help, saying thank you, and saying, Lord, I can't do this day without you? If you start as simple as that, how much different could your day be? To start every day seeking God's presence, and then to end every day. To say, these might be the ways in which I fell short, but Lord, these are the things you gave me today, and how grateful can I be? If you start and end every day with gratitude, that will have an exponential difference in your life. In 12-step circles, we say that it's conscious contact with God. But I would say in this space of Christian worship, it's about following Jesus. Henry Nouwen points out that everything in life tells us that we should strive for success, for wealth, for popularity, and for these grand things. We should be looking to move up in the world, right? You've heard about that. We want to move up the ladder at our jobs. We want to move up in our income level. We want to move up in neighborhoods. We want to move up in a lot of things in life. We're taught at an early age that success comes by moving up. But Nouwen says life with God is the opposite. he writes about the downward mobility. That to follow Jesus is not to seek to move up, but rather to move down. To not say that my life is about achieving success and popularity and wealth and all of these things, but could my life be about how can I move toward the margins where people are in need? How could I speak up for those who have no voice? How could I love and care for ways that make me give of myself so that I remember that in life there is more to life than just me? It's a downward mobility now, and says. The tension, right? We live in the tension. A couple years ago, the height of the COVID crisis, really when it first came, I've really been reminded all week that it was around Easter when COVID hit. And I look back at like memories on social media, and I remember that first Easter with you all, that it was just bananas, that we were all at home and we shut it down. And I'm almost a little sentimental for that time that we came through together. I read this week, 3 years ago, N.T. Wright, the great theologian, wrote about how, as Christians, we don't have answers for all of life's greatest tragedies. We wish we did, and any Christian who's out there peddling answers to everything is probably full of it or making it up themselves. Because Wright says we don't have answers as Christians. God does not give us those answers. What God gives us instead is a story. A story that we live into this week of Holy Week. A story of life's celebrations, of life's sorrows, of everything in between. A story of how Jesus' friends love him and then abandon him. A story of how it was the women who probably cared for him most, who walked with him all the way to the cross and beyond. A story that says that God meets us in every circumstance of life, wherever we are. Good, bad, and in between. That's our story. We can't explain when terrible things happen, but we can offer a story that says we're not alone when they do. And sometimes that's the best news of all. Some of the most healing moments of my life, and maybe yours too, have not been when pain goes away, because we don't really know when pain goes away. But it's when somebody shows up and says, basically, you don't have to carry that pain alone. They bring a casserole. They sit with us. They call or text us. They care. They let us know that we're not the first people that have had this terrible thing ever happen, and that we don't have to go through it alone. When others walk that downward mobility toward us. How powerful that is. It's this great reminder that wherever we are in life, good, bad, and in between, whatever's going on in the world, good, bad, and in between, to follow Jesus is to seek a downward mobility toward love and caring and solidarity. To say that nobody has to be alone. That we can be for one another and with one another. And if this Holy Week teaches us anything at all, through the ups and the downs of it, maybe we hear the best news of all, that whatever we are going through in life, Jesus will meet us there, because he's walked that way too. He's hurt too. He's celebrated. He's done it all. And he meets us. He meets you wherever you are too. Amen.